this invitation. And for us, I think it's very important to be here, to also share our experiences, but also to learn what others have experienced in terms of compiling this type of work. This has been a huge task, not just for us, but also for countries that are providing the data to us. So I came from the Statistics Division of the International Telecommunication Union. Our main work focuses on the data collection and dissemination of telecommunication and information and communication technology indicators. But at the same time, we also set standards in terms of the indicators that we collect. We train countries, and we also cooperate with international organizations in terms of ensuring the comparability of the indicators that we collect. So the ICT Development Index is one of the activities that we do in terms of analyzing the data that we collect. So unlike other agencies that have shared here, our role is also twofold. One is to collect and also to analyze the data that we collect. So what is the ICT Development Index? Unlike other indices that we have heard, this is a very simple index comprising of 11 indicators grouped into 3 sub-indices, which we call ICT access, ICT use, and ICT skills. You will see from this slide the different weights and aggregation that we have assigned to each of the sub-indices and the indicators included in this index. So the index came from a request from our member states to develop a single measure that would reflect ICT developments in countries. And so this we tried to group into a conceptual framework that would reflect the ICT development and usage in countries. It started in 2008, and we first published it in 2009, and we have been doing that annually since then. This is, of course, intended for governments, but also for analysts, researchers, and other users of our data. But the most users of this index are, of course, the countries. The objective is, as I mentioned, to measure the weaknesses and strengths of countries in the 3 subcomponents that I've mentioned earlier, and to see where the countries could focus their policies in terms of improving ICT availability and usage. This has been a part of this annual publication. We always try to have chapters that analyzes the results of the index, and we look at different angles in terms of the rankings and different analyses that could come up from these values and rankings. We try to always compare the 2 years. We try to pick whatever is the most recent data that we have, but we also try to compare it to a previous year where a meaningful analysis could be done. The last one was launched in November 2015 in our biggest meeting, which is called the World Telecommunication Indicators Symposium. And this has received a wide coverage in terms of the media, and the countries were very appreciative of the work that was done on this area, and most specifically on the assessment that was done by JRC on this index. So just to give you a quick overview of some of the results, we have looked for the 2015 edition of this index, we have looked at 167 countries and economies, and we ranked them according to these 3 sub-indices comprising of the 11 indicators. So the top 10 came from mostly from this region, but topped by Korea as an economy from Asia. And these economies share similar characteristics, which is of high income levels and competitive markets and skilled population. So we also look at the dynamic improvements of countries, not just focusing on the top performers, but also looking at the changes in terms of the rankings and the value of the index for the 2 years that we compared. And so for the last edition of this index, we have found out that Costa Rica and Bahrain are the 2 dynamic countries out of the 167 countries that we look at. We also look at the IDI values and group them into quartiles. And out of this analysis, we highlighted the countries that are colored in yellow, and we call them the low IDI countries, which are also called the least connected countries. And so these least connected countries are almost similar to the least developed countries that are in this list. We have also analyzed the improvements in these quartiles and found that the countries that are classified as low connected are the ones that are lagging behind in terms of ICT developments. So in 2010, this was the first time where we were requested to review the ICT Development Index, and this came from the first time we released the value of the index, the first time in 2009. I think we have similar experiences like any other organization that does the index. We have received a number of questions and not necessarily complaints, but questions from countries asking us why we chose the indicators, the aggregation method that we use, and even the normalization method that we use. Although we use religiously the handbook that the JRC and OECD published, still it was a challenge for us to address the questions that are coming from countries. So what came out from the meeting that was held in 2010 was a suggestion to look at the methodology of the index, including the indicators that are included in the index. So in 2011, we opened a discussion item in our expert groups. So we have 2 expert groups that looks at the different sets of indicators that we collect. And in one of the expert group, the topic of the index was open. There were many experiences and suggestions that were inputted into that discussion, and one of them is on the indicators. The countries are not necessarily interested at how the aggregation was done, but they want to see indicators that will most favor the developments in their country. So for us, it is a challenge because we have to make sure that the data are available in as many countries as possible, but at the same time that it captures whatever is happening in most of these countries. So in 2015, we decided to approach JRC to do this audit and to see mainly whether the statistical properties of the index is complying to the standards that it is supposed to comply, and also to show whether this index is transparent enough to reflect what is happening in the countries. And the results of this assessment was presented in the meeting that we conducted, both in the expert group and in the global meeting where we presented it to all countries. So like any other assessments that was done by JRC, the assessment was done in 3 different areas on the quality checks of the data, the assessment and coherence of the different methodologies used in terms of the aggregation and the weighting, of course, that are reflected in the ranking. And the conclusion that came out from this assessment is that we are not necessarily doing something which is wrong, and we were happy to hear that as an organization doing this index. But at the same time, it is good for justifying that the methodologies and the indicators that we use are complying with international standards that are used in this area. So what was found out of this analysis is that the 3-level structure of the index is robust enough and coherent to reflect what is necessary for policy making. So what does it bring to us in terms of the benefits of this assessment? So as I mentioned earlier, we were faced with questions and the need to justify why we chose the indicators and the different methodologies that we applied to this index. But with this assessment, it became easier for us to tell to countries and to educate the users of the index how the index was prepared, and that it is not necessarily just us choosing this methodology, but this is based on statistical standards and methodologies that were prepared by experts. We were able also to justify the choice of the indicators, and the appropriateness of the choice was mainly driven by the conceptual framework of the index. And of course, this reflects and ensure that the rankings, which was mainly the output that was picked up by countries, that they are reflecting what is really happening in the different parts of the world. And of course, for us as the division that works in the index, it helps us to identify the areas that needs improvement. It helps us to identify where we can improve in terms of the indicators, and also the methodologies that could be expanded and look at in the next edition of the index. So just to conclude, the index as one of the products, it also has a visualization tool. So if any one of you is interested in terms of checking the different ways we've produced the results and compare the countries, it's available in this link. And at the same time, the methodology behind the index is available. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Esperanza.